Whenever you're working in 3ds Max, especially if you want to collaborate with other people, as well as work with photometric lights and realistic light settings, what you want to do is create all of your objects in the proper scale. In order to do that, you'll need to set up a proper unit system so that you can use whichever unit you prefer, whether it be centimeters, inches, meters, or whatever. The way you do that is by going into the Customize menu, Unit Setup. So by default, it should be set up to either US standard or something like that, but what we want to do is switch it to a metric system and then choose centimeters. Depending on whether you're going to create smaller or larger objects, you might want to switch to millimeters, meters, or even kilometers, but at this point centimeters is going to work just fine for us. After you're done with that, just click OK. Now we're going to learn how to create basic standard primitive objects in 3ds Max. On the right side, you'll find the command panel, and the first part of it, the first panel of it, is the create panel. So next to it you have the modify panel, the hierarchy panel, and so on, but what we want to work with is the one that has this plus sign here, create. Underneath it we have an option to create different things like geometry, shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, and so on. We're going to switch to geometry, and by default we're going to see standard primitives from this drop-down menu. Underneath that you have an object type list, and here we have an option to create a box, a cone, sphere, geosphere, cylinder, tube, torus, pyramid, teapot, a plane, and the text plus or 3D text. We're going to start by creating a box. So left click on the button that says box and go over into the perspective view. The way in which we create a box is we first left click and hold, then drag out to create the base for our box, then release and drag upwards or downwards to select the height of our box. Once we're happy with the result, just left click again. Now you'll notice that right now the box button is still highlighted. That means that we're still in box creation mode. So if we left click again anywhere, we're going to start creating a new box. So left click, hold down and drag to create the base, release the left mouse click and drag upwards or downwards to select the height. Left click again to finish creating the box. We can do this in any of these views, so I can create a box in the top view if I wish. And as you'll see, it's going to appear in all of the views simultaneously. When we've finished creating the box, just right click anywhere, we will exit the box creation tool. Now, we can create other objects as well. Creating a cone is not that difficult either. So just left click and drag to select the base size, release the left click, drag upwards or downwards to select the height, left click again and then drag to select the top. It can be just one point or it can be circular, regardless of whether you want to create something like a cone that has a cutoff top or a cone that has a pointy top. Once you're finished and you're satisfied with the result, just left click again. So left click and drag to create the base, release the left mouse click, drag upwards or downwards to select the height, left click again and then drag again, upwards, downwards, left or right left click again. Once you're done creating the cone, just right click to exit the cone creation tool, and you'll notice that once you've done that, the cone button will no longer be highlighted. We can create spheres in quite a similar way. I'll try to create this one in the front view. Just left click and drag, create a sphere. You can do it in the top view as well. Cylinder is created similarly to the way we created a cone. The only thing is that the bottom and top are going to be the same shape. So we left click and drag to create the base, release the left mouse button, drag upwards or downwards, select the height, left click again, and we created our cylinder. A tube can be created by left clicking and dragging to select diameter, releasing, then dragging again to select the thickness of our tube, left click again, and drag upwards or downwards to select the height of our tube. And I'm going to right click to exit tube creation mode. Torus can be created by, first of all, left clicking and dragging to select the diameter, releasing and dragging left or right to select the thickness. Similarly, a pyramid, left click and drag to select the base shape, then release the left click and drag upwards or downwards to select the height. In the command panel, the second tab, right next to the Create tab, is the Modify tab or Modify panel. If any object is selected and we click on the Modify panel, we will see its name, a list of modifiers if it has any, and we will see a set of parameters. Depending on the type of object that we've selected, we'll have different parameters that we can edit. This box that we've created is currently named Box 001, and we can easily rename it by just typing in a name that we want. In this case, we can call it a gray box. Hit enter to save the name. We can choose an object's ID color if we wish, which isn't actually a material or a texture, but rather just a color that appears in our viewport. We can choose the color next to the place where we can see the name of the object. Just clicking on the rectangle, we'll see an object color window appear, and we can choose a different object color if we want, whether it be yellow, green, blue, or whatever. But since we've already named it gray box, we can just leave it with gray and press OK. Some other parameters that we can see here are the length, width, and height parameters, which determine the length, width, and height of this object. In this case, all of these three parameters are set in centimeters. If by any chance in all of these fields you do not have any specific unit designated, or if it's a different unit from a centimeter, you can easily change that if you want. Just go to Customize, Unit Setup, and then select any specific unit that you want. It can be a metric or a US standard, and even if you're in the metric system, you can choose whether the unit is centimeters, millimeters, meters, or kilometers. What this basically means is you can still create objects that are going to be several centimeters or several meters or several millimeters big, but that just means that by default, if you type in any value like 88, 3ds Studio Max is going to consider that you meant 88 centimeters. Now, if you want to change the scale of this object, you can just type in different values in the parameters section. So let's say if we wanted this box to be 60 centimeters long, 80 centimeters wide, and 50 centimeters tall, we can just type in 60, press enter, you can press tab to switch to the next parameter. Now we set 60, then it's going to be, let's say, 80. Press tab again, and then 50, and press enter. And as you can see, I do not need to type in C and M for centimeters. I just type in a specific value, press enter, and it automatically sets it to centimeters. So now, in our virtual space, this box is 60 by 80 by 50 centimeters in scale. This is important to always work in real-world scale, because once you start working with lights and cameras, if your scale is not set up as it should be, if the objects are too big, like several meters or kilometers big, or too small, like several millimeters, your lights and your cameras might not work correctly. Another way to change the length and width and height of your objects from the parameters section of the Modify panel is just left-clicking and dragging on these arrows that point upwards or downwards, and now you can incrementally increase or decrease the scale of your object. But let's just leave it at 60 centimeters at this point. Another important aspect of the parameter section is the length, width, and height segments that we see here. Now currently all of these are set to 1, but with the box that you've created it might be a different number, like 4, 5, or 6. Usually it's 4. Now what that means is basically these numbers tell us how many segments each of these polygons, each of these sides is divided into. I can raise the number from, let's say, 1 to any different number, and I'm going to set the length, width, and height segments to 4. I can do that by simply selecting the number, pressing 4, hitting enter, pressing tab again, 4, enter, tab again, 4, enter. Now you don't see any changes here in the perspective view because our show edged faces mode is switched off. To turn it on, we need to press F4. And now we can see that each of these sides is divided into 4 by 4 segments. If we're not going to modify this box any further, except for maybe just adjusting its length, width, and height, we don't even need more segments than 1 segment per side, and we can just set all of these segments to 1. One way of doing that is right-clicking on these arrows, and the length, width, and height segments are going to be set to 1. But if we want to work with this box further and to create a more complex object out of it, it's always a good idea to start with a different number of segments. We'll discuss that in more detail as we go into complex object creation, working with edit poly, and working with modifiers later on. With different object types, you'll have a chance to work with different properties. So for instance, if I select cone, in my Create panel, Geometry, Standard Primitives, and go and create a cone by left-clicking, dragging out, releasing the left mouse button, dragging upwards or downwards to set the height, left-click again, and then dragging left or right to set the top, left-click again. If we go into the Modify panel now, we'll see that we have all of these different parameters for our cone. First off, let's rename it and call it Blue Cone. Hit enter. Now, of course, we want it to be blue, so the color corresponds to its name. And the way we can do that is just left-click on this color swatch and select any blue color that you wish. Now you can see that here we have different parameters. So first one is radius 1, the second one is radius 2, and then we have the height. Radius 1 is the size of our base. Radius 2 is the size of our top, which can be set to 0 if we wish, if we want it to be a totally pointy top, or we can set it to a value that's more than 0 if we want it to be a cone that has a cutoff top. The height, as the name suggests, determines the height of our cone. And again, we have a chance to select the number of height segments, and if I increase or decrease this number by left-clicking on these arrows, you can see the number of segments for the height increasing or decreasing. The same as with the sides, so if I change that number, it's going to change the number of side segments. And currently our cap segments is set to a value of 1, which means that currently the top and the bottom are just one polygon, but we can change that by raising the number. As you can see, it divides it in a specific way, as if drawing radial lines or edges from the center outwards. Now this could present a problem, because if we have any specific number of segments here, even if it's 1, this is not a 4-sided polygon, and this needs to be edited later on, but for now we do not need to worry about that too much.